Welcome to the final Impact Council of 2025. While we wait for people to come in, I'll just start doing a little bit of housekeeping and overview of setting the stage for today. I am Melissa Roscoe. I am the Executive Director and President of the Impact Communications Institute, and I'm the CEO of ULU Impact Communications. Please feel free to share in the chat where you're joining us from. I love seeing the wide breadth of our network and community. So please pop in your company and your city and say hello. I am joining from Vancouver, British Columbia today, which sits on the unceded ancestral traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I am co-moderating with my very good friend and fellow ICI board member, Brad McAfee. He is the CEO of KO Media and the founder of Mission and Cause, and he's a PR veteran, global CEO of some of the largest companies. Wonderful brain, wonderful human. And he's joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, the ancestral lands of the Muskogee Creek and Cherokee peoples. Did I say that right, Brad? Yeah, okay, I'm getting the nod. Good, very good. In today's session, we're going to close the year out by looking back at the most pivotal moments in impact communications in 2025. So we're looking from campaigns that set new standards to crises that reshaped the conversation. This has been a year that has tested our field. It's sharpened our instincts and challenged every communicator to rethink business as usual. So this session is designed to spark reflection, and we, as always, welcome some feedback and input at the end. You can feel free to drop your questions in as we go, but we won't be really opening it up for Q&A until later on. And to that point, guidelines. Brad, do you want to take it away so I don't lose my voice before we start the Q&As?
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, let me jump in on guidelines. This is a discussion. So the one thing is, please, everyone, our guidelines are respect opinions. So if you do have a critique or something, remember we're critiquing a thought, a concept, but not the individual. We invite participation. There's a couple different ways in which we'll do this. One of which is we have boxed out some time for formal Q&A, but also participate along the way through the chat. Whether you have a comment or you want to add some facts or something to what's being said, feel free to use the chat, and also, ask a question in the chat. And if it's in the right flow, we'll maybe even call on you and bring you into the discussion early. So that's the second way. And then the third is, I would just want everyone to, as a reminder, we are recording, and we're recording one because we really have some really great content. But second, we're going to do a replay for those who couldn't be with us today, which will be on the ICI YouTube channel.
That's right. And for those of you joining us for the first time today, we are the Impact Communications Institute is a nonprofit dedicated to using the power of communications to drive positive and systemic change. You can learn more about us at impactcommsinstitute.org. And if you believe in responsible and ethical communications, we invite you to pledge, and that will ensure that you're always included in any of the initiatives that we run, such as our impact councils.
Awesome. And now it feels like let's introduce these experts that many people already know. If you go to any conferences and that kind of thing, you've probably seen both of them as a speaker. They're leading thought leaders on the topic of stories that matter, stories with impact, and quite frankly, just impact consulting. So first of all, we have Abena Hayes, who's the CEO of Elise Consulting and a fellow ICI executive board member. She is a seasoned communications and brand marketing vet with expertise in healthcare, corporate reputation, inclusion, and social impact, and a lot more as well. For more than 20 years, Abena has helped U.S. and global companies with stakeholders, influencers, communities, and transformative narratives, dynamic storytelling, and very meaningful engagements. We are so fortunate to have Abena here today to talk about these impactful and very meaningful stories of 2025 and where are we going next. Alongside on our panel is Whitney Daly. an executive vice president of purpose at Allison Partners, and leads the agency's Purpose Center of Excellence, a dedicated team specializing in purpose brand strategy and sustainable leadership. Whitney helps clients establish, communicate, and measure sustainable goals and strategies. By the way, I also get to claim that I was a colleague and co employee with Whitney Daly,
Colleague. Yeah.
and we all, have known Whitney for years. She is absolutely wonderful. We're in for a treat with both of you as our expert panel today. So thank you, and thank you to everyone who's joined us.
Yes. And given Whitney's long-standing, impressive history and career in analytics and looking at trends, we thought that we would open up the conversation today with the first question to you, Whitney, which is to just let's look back at the trends in 2025 that surprised you. So looking back in the year at whole, what do you think practitioners are still underestimating about it?
Yeah. First off, I just have to say thank you, Melissa, Brad, the ICI team for having me back. It feels like a very warm welcome to be back at an Impact Council. So thank you for including me in this. I think this is one of my favorite topics is like looking back at a whole year, what's changed, what can we learn from it, where can we go from here? And obviously 2025 was quite a year.
Yeah.
So very valuable conversation. Um, as I think about maybe what surprised me this year, maybe not necessarily a huge surprise to any of us given this year, but I do think it's critically important to touch on just how many brands this year we saw go silent on issues, scrub their white websites, shift their terminology that they've been using, or even back away from their commitments in the impact space. I think in the start of this year, we saw a lot of companies go into wait and see mode, right? Like, okay, we're just gonna like take a step back and kind of see how the year unfolds. We're still seeing a lot of companies in that wait and see mode, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to acknowledge that there's also pitfalls of staying in this wait and see mode and pitfalls to not communicating your impact efforts. Bottom line here, silence is no longer neutral. And it's a strategic choice with consequences. So I think that as brand leaders, as communicators, as folks in the impact space, it's important to, yes, acknowledge, there's risks associated with taking stands, certainly. But there's also risks associated with staying quiet and risks associated with flip-flopping, right? Even more so. So all of these things need to be really taken into account as brand leaders think about what should we reflect on in 2025 and what should this mean moving forward? And I'll just throw in a couple data points because Brad knows me well enough to know I can't do a webinar without talking about data. But there was a lot of great data released this year, which I think is important to absorb and acknowledge because it's going to help us do our work moving forward. So there was a study from Bentley and Gallup. It found 53% of Americans assume if a brand is staying silent on issues, they are doing nothing or potentially hiding something. So again, silence is not neutrality. And I think that really explains that. There was another great study from our friends at Public Inc. And Ipsos earlier this year that found 55% of Americans and Canadians are likely to change their purchasing decisions based on ethical behaviors in the year ahead. 24% have actually already stopped shopping at their favorite brands because of that brand's stance on politics. And I'll close with this last data point, which I think is really important as we talk about the wait and see or the flip-flopping. 45% of Americans found that if a company takes a stand on an issue, they should stick by their decision, even if it makes consumers angry. And that's compared to 14% who disagree. So again, not necessarily surprising, but I think it's really important for us as a community to acknowledge this trend that we're seeing, which is a little bit worrying in terms of just the complicit silence that we're seeing from organizations in this moment.
So I just have a follow-up question on that because I have a communications business that's in the impact space. A lot of the folks on this call are in the impact space. You run a portion of the impact space at your firm, and conversation after conversation this year, it was an economically challenging year because of that silence and that waiting. And then almost like everybody kind of at the same time also started to see an uptick like in Q4. And like what caused it? What changed that we're starting to see the values and the sentiment that silence is not okay, because everybody was being very okay with being silent for a long time this year. Like what's changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is we're seeing consumer response, right? We're seeing the impact of consumer purchasing decisions that are impacting bottom lines of companies that are taking particular stances or not.
Hmm.
And companies are are reflecting on that and saying,
Hmm.
is this really the best path forward for us? Especially brands that have stayed true to their values through thick and thin over many years, and then in 2025 chose to change direction.
Yeah.
Again, it kind of just goes to that overarching concept of, what's the long-term reputational impact of these decisions. And I
Right.
think brands are starting to weigh that. I think there's also a little bit of a loosening of like that level of fear that people are feeling, like, okay, like we can take this step forward. We can be really strategic about our communications. We know there are stakeholders that truly believe in these issues and want brand alignment,
Hmm.
and they want brands to have their back.
Yeah.
So I think that, we all know this is true. I think 2025 was a year where we started to question whether that was true. And
Yeah.
now brands are starting to realize, yes, these tenets of our communications work in terms of purpose communication being impactful remain.
Yeah.
Well,
Nice. Nice to hear.
what a great way to start the conversation about what are brands doing? Are they leaning in? Are they not leaning in? How are they showing up? Because Abena, we started 2025 with a slew of executive orders in the US that changed the DE&I landscape. And really what did 2025 reveal and signal in the wake of the DEI headwinds? Part one of that question. Then second,
Mhm.
what did it reveal about which organizations were serious about equity and which
Mhm.
maybe were just signaling a bit? I know it's a big ball to
Mhm.
untangle, but help
Mhm.
us with this.
So one of the things that I will say is what those executive orders actually did was probably solidify the trend that we were already seeing, right? So because I think up going back about 2 to maybe 3 years ago, we started to see the shift, if you will, in sentiment compared to what we saw in 2020. 2020, everyone was what Judy Smith, who's the inspiration for Olivia Pope and Scandal, said. We are an of the moment society. We saw what happened with George Floyd. We saw what happened with COVID, and everyone was all in it all the time. They doubled down. And as the economy started to shift and change, and you started to see people, for example, in tech in particular, starting to scale back, that was like the beginning of the retrenchment when it came to DEI. And then it just came full throttle from an administration perspective with the executive orders. And I mean, I think if you look at this through the lens of history and civil rights and human rights in the US in particular, it's a pendulum that swings, right? You have the moments of change and the moments of rollback. And what essentially happened in January was a signal that people were looking to roll it back. And to your point, Brad, in terms of what it revealed, I mean, it revealed one who was really in it for the long haul, right? And who wasn't. And then it also showed us the way in which people are now trying to do the work, kind of given the broader risk, right? Because as the Employment Commission in the US here starts to change month by month, what they deem illegal DEI, people are having to make those shifts in language and having to make the shifts in policy to make sure that they can continue the work without now being the subject of a civil investigation, which apparently is meant to happen at any moment.
Well, do
Um,
you mind if I ask a quick follow up too?
sure.
Sorry
Yeah.
about
Sure
that, but
thing.
I'm also curious, right? Because you know, I think leading up to this year, if we were to say, hey, you're going to have outside influence that's going to impact how you're going to communicate about your own internal strategy or a strategy you have. I think a lot
Hmm.
of us would say, well, that doesn't seem like it takes a lot of courage. What do you mean? You're not, if it's a value or if it's a principle in your organization. But we are seeing, and I, quite frankly, I sit on a nonprofit board that had to, really adjust its DE&I language on its site so that it could continue to
Hmm.
get funding from the federal government, right? So
Hmm.
how are we feeling about people, either the organizations perhaps downplaying but still executing on DE&I, but changing language and stuff so that, as you said, they can continue to do the work? Do we
Hmm.
feel, is are we okay with a little compromise because it's still driving the bigger picture, or are we feeling discomfort across the whole board?
So I don't think there's discomfort across the whole board. I think a lot of people literally have a risk calculus that they're using to determine how much they lean in versus
Hmm.
not based on the likelihood of investigation. That's the first thing. But the other piece, which is where you see some people still winning, is the ability of a company or a brand to tie it back to their business, right? So it may be of value, but it's also a business driver. So, for example, if you look at Elf Beauty, they are a brilliant example of how they have threaded that needle between who they are, who they serve, what their value is as a brand, not only in terms of diversity, but also challenging the status quo. And they know they make money from it, right? Their CEO has come out and said he's had 24 profitable quarters. So this strategy works. You saw the same thing with the CEO of Marriott, who basically said, we can't operate because we serve multiple people in multiple countries from different backgrounds. We won't be able to run our business without them.
Yeah.
So I think if you're able to really truly kind of thread that needle and have the through line, there's an easier win vis-a-vis others for whom it might have been squishy, or those who, quite frankly, the administration just wants to make an example of by virtue of a civil investigation.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to stay on the same track, but kind of pivot a little bit of the intentionality. We saw some companies intentionally courting conflict, as you'd say, and I've heard you say in the past, outrage marketing. We're hearing that term a lot this year. What should we understand about this tactic, especially when it backfires?
So, marketing is a phenomenon I think we see with brands like we saw it with American Eagle and many others. And I see my friend Miriam's on this call, and one of our friends who's in a different comms community called Mixing Board, Kristen Culver, has basically said outrage marketing is where the controversy is now the content and the controversy is actually the strategy.
Hmm.
Because if you're able to do something that truly riles people up in a polarized world, you leverage it to be able to get visibility and spark conversation. The key in that is making sure that you have enough people who are supporters of your brand to actually
Hmm.
rally around you. But it's basically an approach that allows you to get that visibility that you're looking for.
I mean, could one say that that's just a term that's being attributed to people with different values or beliefs than the liberal marketing, like cause-based, like inclusive?
Right? No, because I actually think then there's a Fast Company article that came out about it, which you can drop in the chat, where I think
Yeah.
it's actually
Mhm.
very deliberate. And I don't
Yeah.
know if it's because people are looking to rile specific sectors up. I think they just know if they do and say something that's going to spark that engagement, they'll go for it. There's an AI company, I think, who've done some ads here in New York about um, like baby reveals and genetic testing, and they
Yeah.
deliberately push that envelope to not only get the attention, because we're operating in an attention
Yeah.
economy, but they were able to spark a debate about it. And if that debate is going to get you the visibility that you want, I think a lot of people now are looking and willing to take that risk. I think the piece though about the backfiring part, I think that's where you have to make sure that if you know you're gonna like go for the jugular literally, you have to have a
Hmm.
mitigation plan, right?
Yeah.
Which is where if you look again at what American Eagle did with that Sydney Sweeney jeans, I mean, they inferred so much with eugenics, so much in terms of outdated perceptions of and racialized perceptions of beauty. There were so many
Yeah.
things that were wrong with it. But their
Mhm.
CMO has literally gone on a speaking tour talking about how brilliant their strategy was in terms of getting attention. And if
Yeah.
you're
Okay.
looking
Fair.
really to be front and center, the
Yeah.
outrage piece is really what's going to get you there.
Right. All right. Enough about that. My it's not making me feel nice and warm and fuzzy, and I would like to. So let's
No,
talk
it's not
about
a warm and
robots
funny thing.
instead. I'm going to switch over to Whitney. Let's talk about AI for a second because we're not going to attend a single session this year without it touching the topics. It's changed everything from speed and tone. And what, in your opinion, analytical view, communicator view, are the biggest AI misconceptions that you've watched play out in 2025?
Yeah. I first of all, I don't think I would call AI warm and fuzzy.
I know.
I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
We'll get there. I don't know if we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll try to find.
Yeah. Yeah, AI. Wow. What a year it's been, right? I think for adopters of AI in the impact space, we're definitely through the benefits, right? There are benefits, let's be real. Speed, I mean, how quickly can we move because of having these massive computers at our fingertips? The ability to do deep research at scale. We obviously need to acknowledge the impact that AI is having to our environment, sustainability goals, our grid. So just putting that out there, we can't talk about AI in an impact space without acknowledging that.
On that note, I'm just going to drop in an ethical AI policy, and I welcome, Whitney, you
Love
to give
that.
me your feedback on this because we wrote it earlier this year and so much has changed, but we have been sharing it so that people just have a little bit of a framework, an ethical framework. There's some warm and fuzzy. Um, but yeah, how often should we be reviewing those too? But back to you.
Yeah. Oh gosh, great. I can't wait to look at that. And I'll definitely share it with my AI team here at Allison. So in terms of one of the biggest misconceptions that I'm seeing, I think especially when, organizations, firms started really adopting AI, there was this promise that there was going to be some sort of like human replacement, right? Like, and I think that is vastly, vastly overhyped, like, especially within the context of strategy and impact comms. AI cannot replace human connection in our purpose driven work. Underline, period, full stop, right? Like the most successful campaigns, yes, some of them might use AI to amplify deep partnerships, do
Brainstorm.
that speed that work. Yeah, but like we can't replace the humanity that's so critical to the work that we do every day. I mean, we're talking about impact issues. I mean, I can give an example of this because I think it helps kind of contextualize. I'm not sure if anyone on the call saw the campaign from Natura, which is a Brazilian cosmetics company, but they essentially used AI and drone technology to map like 10,000 acres of the Amazon forest. It took them 6 months to do this. Without AI, it would have taken them probably 25 years to do this full map, this audit of the wildlife there, the plants, the whole ecosystem. And they actually used it to create a kind of like a valuation. They called it a green inventory. So like a valuation of why you don't need to participate in deforestation in order to benefit from the amazing place that is the Amazon.
Yeah.
The reason that this campaign really worked, though, is because Natura partnered with local communities, partnered with Indigenous peoples to really be able to understand that community and local level context that was so important. Like technology alone was not going to be able to really show the incredible benefits of the Amazon to communities and to our entire globe. But certainly those that have been living there for thousands and thousands of years can provide that context. So again, this is an example. Yes, technology was able to accelerate the rate at which this mapping was able to take place, but it was the human expertise and the cultural knowledge that really made this campaign shine and create such deep authenticity. So yeah, that I think
that was a very cool
something...
one. I was really impressed when I saw that one too. I remember that one.
Yeah. So great example, I think, to just show, AI, it definitely has its benefits, but we need to acknowledge, especially in the space that we're in, we're people and we're helping people and we're serving people and we're talking to people, and that needs to be forefront in the work.
Yeah. The way I talk to my team about it, I like there's no more stigma around using it. It is a work tool, just like
Yeah.
Microsoft Office
Hmm.
and spell
Yeah.
check and the internet and research. It is a work tool. You can create canvases, you can edit, you can do iterative editing. So making sure that your team is AI proficient should be a priority for everybody in the next coming year if it hasn't already happened. Because it's not going anywhere and it's a fantastic tool to be used, but it definitely needs a human part of it. It's like Microsoft Office can't work without the human behind it either. And it's not that different when you think about the quality of outcome. So,
But Melissa, I've been going around and talking with a lot of different agency leaders, but this applies to non-agencies as well.
mhm.
And 25, I think, on AI also started to bring in the investment around, a variety of pilot projects, development projects, internal facing, maybe client facing, right? And a lot of development. And what's been interesting, I think this will come into picture in 26, is what does that investment look like? So in talking with some agencies, one agency said $1,000 per head. Number of people we have, we invest 1,000 per head in AI. So I think you're going to start
Great
seeing
return.
metrics, kind of unfold, and I think we'll see some measurements as well on, is it really helping us be more productive, more efficient, deliver better quality, and those types of things. But
Yeah.
we started this conversation on the big shifts, the overarching big shifts of 2025. Let's get a little bit more micro. And I want to shift this conversation, Whitney, to start with around the media and the power struggles and pressure that's happened in the media this year. And we'll start kind of more on the social media side, with Meta, ending third party fact checking and kind of some different platform rules have, been a little bit destabilizing in 2025. How has that reshaped the information environment for brands?
Yeah. Such a great question, Brad. And it just so happens that this is a topic I have been totally nerding out on for about a year. I'm really fascinated by how myth and disinformation bots and trolls are impacting brands today, brand health, brand monitoring, brand action. We actually conducted research in late 2024 on this topic as it relates to, Meta fact checking, where people were finding their news, how they were doing their own fact checking or not. We found less than a third of Americans were likely to check the credibility or authenticity of an account posting content. So they're just going online, they're seeing what their network or someone that's been reposted is sharing on their Facebook, and they're saying, wow, okay, look at this news story. Like, I'm going to go talk to my friends and family about it now without having done any due diligence. We found the same amount, around 34%, would be unlikely to check or verify the accuracy of a news article or event. And knowing, the ways in which we get our news today, I think that's something that brands really need to take into account. Pair that with that Americans report that they're just as likely to trust people within their social network as online news sources, as being kind of a trustworthy place to get their news. And just to drive the point home, this is not our own research, but a similar study conducted in the UK found 46% of children ages 12 to 15 who use social media for their news say they find it's difficult to tell whether a story is true or not. So I think the implication here of Meta ending its fact checking is that individuals aren't really likely to do it on their own. So what does that mean for brands today, right? I think it means that we need to get so much smarter on how this can impact our reputation, conversations happening around our brands, crisis velocity moments. And I know this is not just for the impact space, this is for all comms marketing folks as well. There was a great quote from an individual at Carnegie Mellon University, Ari Lightman, who said that the Meta kind of moving away from fact checking could turbocharge the engine for disinformation. So just to close this out, like, what does this all mean for brands? Get your house in order. If you don't have deep social listening tools, get them. Make sure that you're monitoring the right conversations that could really increase in scale and velocity and become a reputational threat for your organization, be prepared. So do you have a crisis plan around misinformation around your brand? I can think of some brands that probably spend a lot of time thinking about this, but maybe there's others that need to take a minute and really think about that. And then be proactive. I think this is something, when we think about misinformation impacting brands, we often think about it through the reactive lens, right? Oh, people are saying this, it's not true. How do we counteract it? But how can you actually, through monitoring online conversations, through really scrubbing the depths of the social networks, be able to identify some of these threats in advance and mitigate them before they become a major reputational challenge for your brand?
Such good points. Really good points.
I have follow-ups, but I don't want to delay it much more. But no, I won't. I won't. Okay, Evan, I'm going to shift it over to you. Let's talk about media censorship. It's a huge topic this year. The most, I think, notable one would probably be Jimmy Kimmel's suspension, but then also lawsuits targeting journalists. So what do some of these cases signal about the pressure shaping public discourse?
I mean, I think it signals a range of different things. I mean, I think it's clear now that there will continue to be, because I firmly believe this, debate around what constitutes free speech versus hate speech. Kind of given what the catalyst was for the Jimmy Kimmel suspension. But I also think it will likely fuel more polarized discourse, and will also force a lot of journalists to determine how they operate if they really truly want to focus on their journalistic integrity and their objectivity. And I think that's why when you look at kind of the exodus of a lot of these reporters to platforms like Substack, you're probably going to start to see more people either establishing their own platforms or going to that one to really truly serve as this a credible source of information in the face of all the noise. I think like Terry Moran, who was from ABC News, I think is a really great example of that, who offered a perspective on what he was seeing from the administration and then was swiftly booted out. So I think people are going to find different places and spaces to get the information that they need, just knowing that what we're going to what we're going to continue to see, be it on social and be it on certain legacy platforms, given the consolidation that we're seeing, that continued like fraught public debate. I don't think it's going to end. And I think there's going to be even more catalysts for it. For example, in a conversation I was having yesterday, knowing that next year is the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America, I think you're going to start to see a very fractured discourse around what that observance actually means, and where we are now as a country and how we move forward. I think it's just the beginning of an ongoing trend, unless there's some other seminal event that forces people to pause.
I mean,
I know that's not the most optimistic answer. I
know. I'm
apologize.
shocked sometimes that the Constitution is still sort of the same. Like,
well, right, but
embrace the
now,
change.
I mean, I am not a lawyer. My dear mother, who's no longer with us, was and wanted me to be one. But I would. It's going to be interesting to see the interpretations of the Constitution and the laws behind it, because there's so much in it that I think makes a lot of sense in terms of how people show up. But I think because, to Whitney's point, there's so many people who are seeing themselves as the experts. I think you're going to see subjective interpretations.
Yeah.
So, Abena, staying kind of in the same context here with, CBS and ABC, did they take a stand? Did they not take a stand? Did they cave? Did they step up? Let's go broader than just media companies. Earlier, Whitney was talking about staying silent is an action, right? And so let's just look at companies have pressure many to stay neutral right now. Better to keep low, don't surface, right? Even though when their values suggest otherwise, right? So what advice do you have for brands, organizations that, maybe their employees may even want them to take a position or a stand or voice up, and like, how do you counsel, or what would you say to them?
So one of the first things I usually say, like in terms of determining what you hold true to publicly versus not, is ensuring that whatever you do allows you to continue your license to operate, right? Because essentially, if you look at everything that the administration is doing, it's trying to undo everybody. So it's like, what are the activations, the areas of focus that are tethered to your values to still allow you to operate given how the environment currently is? That's the first thing. But the other piece to it is making sure that your employees are not only aware of this process, but you bring them along. Like now, I think companies need to be even more transparent than they've ever been because one, you everybody needs their people. We know it's a terrible job market, but we also know that because anything that is done or said in the company is practically public information. If you don't have your employees on your side, that is the one thing that will completely screw you. So, what I advise a lot of my clients to do, and I've seen a lot of companies do this, is they're very upfront in terms of the headwinds and challenges that they're facing and sharing the rationale for what they're doing because even though you'll always find people who don't agree, as long as they understand where you're coming from, I think that's the piece that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. And just a reference, I'm going to do an ICI mini commercial here. There was a great session December of, I want to say 2023. Melissa,
Hmm.
somebody fact check that, I hope.
Okay.
But and it was with Linda Rutherford of Southwest Airlines. And what she was going through is how important having a kind of decision making
Decision
tool
making framework. Yeah.
Yeah.
and a framework and a whole processes and making sure you have diverse participants throughout your organization participating. So it's a more rational, data driven go, no go if we should engage on this decision. Does it align with the brand? Does it align with our stakeholders? Does it align with our own values? And it kind of gives you that more level of confidence to
Yeah.
act if you want to act. So I think for those of you, I think we have that session on our YouTube channel as well. It's worthy.
Sadly, Brad, we
You know,
don't because that's why it's important to tune into the live versions, folks, because there was just too many sort of like brand specific commitments and she was opening up her whole playbook to us. But we did say in the beginning, like this will be for viewers that tune in and we won't post it afterwards.
sorry about that. Never mind.
That's
Go
okay.
look
It's
for it.
still a commercial.
It's
Yeah.
still a commercial. But the other thing I would just say, if anyone's looking for information that's publicly available on what Brad was referencing, I think Sally Sussman, who is now the outgoing chief communications officer at Pfizer, wrote a book on communications and she actually has the Pfizer framework in her book and
Mhm.
kind of walks people through how they used it to respond to certain things like the war in Ukraine. So that's something to take a look at.
That would be a very interesting perspective through the
Yeah.
lens of Pfizer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to really try to bring back the warm and fuzzies every chance I get. So, Whitney, let's talk about some wins. What stood out in terms of values aligned campaigns or statements this year, and why did they land?
Yeah. Okay. Now we get to talk about the fun stuff. Um, yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about like real-time response frameworks. I actually joined a webinar recently with Carlene Pickard, formerly of Lush, who now is at Ben and Jerry's, and Michelle Lampick from Bobby, their kind of social impact arm. And we were talking about their various approaches to responding to societal moments in time. And after that, I see this campaign announcement from Bobby, and this was one of my favorite campaigns of the year. Maybe a little bit of a hot take, but I really liked the Bobby partnership with Cardi B, the chief confidence
But
officer.
it's
Yeah.
I think unlike most vanity titles that we see, right, with celebrities, like this actually really did have deep advocacy lines. I mean, my favorite part of the program was the direct kind of phone line pipeline that they had where people could call in, share their personal experiences. It was 732 QQ Cardi. So you could call in, parents could call in, they could share their challenges related to lack of paid leave, lack of maternal health, kind of disparities that exist within our healthcare system.
Mhm.
And those testimonials and conversations were shared directly with lawmakers. So I just love that like through line from
Very cool.
the individual experience to straight to Congress. Like, this is what your constituents are saying. This is how they're impacted. Will you help in this moment? And this campaign in particular did kind of launch in timing with the Family Act, which was up for debate. So again, I liked that campaign because it brought in celebrity, like it had a big splash, but it was super aligned to Bobby's like reason for being, right? And it really directly tied to moving the needle through engaging on policy. When many brands, I will say, are not publicly engaging on policy moments. So really interesting.
Yeah. And then the brands that are engaging on policy moments, like they might have been doing it for a long time, but it's really hard to do it for the next generation that are going to see it and engage with it. And this is such a creative example. I love that one.
Yeah.
Who didn't do it well? Who had some
Brad, you're going to bring us back to the
we got to be realistic, and let's remember.
humbug.
Let's remember, you always can learn in both scenarios,
That's
right?
true.
So, so that's why we want to showcase some of the lessons learned. But what brands or organizations may have had missteps?
So one of the ones that, and there's another one that sparked not only the outrage but conversation, was the Cracker Barrel rebrand. Because it's very clear that they were looking to expand their audience, because you can only make so much money and have enough value based on a core constituent or audience base. But going from the logo that they had to one that could be anything, it could even have been the Crate and Barrel logo for all that we know, it completely backfired, because everyone who lives in the South, who's ever gone in and sat on those rocking chairs, was pissed, right? And there were even people who worked for Cracker Barrels who were like, this is not what we're about. And if I were that CMO, and I understand she was a new-ish CMO, I would have tried and she really felt they needed a rebrand. She needed to figure out a way to come up with something that was still going to resonate with not only the people who were their core customers, but also come up with something that was the core for who they are. Love it or hate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to try to swing us back to good examples again. Whitney, Airbnb, Costco, these are some brands that showed some genuine follow through this year. What can we learn, especially for the smaller resourced companies, through their journey and their success?
Yeah, I feel like Abhina's getting all the difficult questions, and I'm
I
getting
know. You know what, Abhina, you feel free to jump in on this one too.
Whitney, you start and I'll chime. How's that?
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I think for smaller teams, you know, what can we take from the playbooks of the Costco's of the world? First, I think it's about, and this, I've been saying this for many years, but authentic purpose work is more than just comms or marketing, right? It's embedded into the core of who you are, what you do, your core operations, and the prisms in which you make decisions. So any organization can do that, right? Like any organization can infuse purpose into their very core. And I think that that's really important. The other point I would make, which maybe is a newer thing for organizations to think about, and we touched on it at the top of the call, is, you know, keeping your purpose front and center. It should be part of the entire brand experience, not only for your consumers, but your employees and other stakeholders, and not wavering from it. So if your purpose is truly what you say it is, then you should be able to stand by it in good times and bad. So just a couple of points.
You know, I mean, I 100% agree with that. It's funny that you mentioned the Bobby example, because I had used that in another presentation, because I think that is a brand that truly lives its purpose and values in every which way that it shows up. And the other one that I like to use as an example is Maven Clinic, which is a company focused on providing women's health and family building services. And they're very much about closing the care gaps across not only a women's journey, but addressing all of the access issues related to reproductive health and building families. And everything that they do is connected to that. So I think it reinforces the importance of the through lines, and reinforces the importance of making sure that this is all connected to your business. Because if this is how you operate, this is the only way you can actually exist in the world.
Yeah. Okay. You might have just answered what I wanted to ask you next, but like what do you think the based on this year's trends, what do you think next year is going to demand of communicators who want to lead with that kind of courage?
I mean, I
Like,
think
what are
it's
some
it's a
quick steps? What do like if you could just list them off or
I mean, the first thing is, I mean, always remember what's at your center and your core. But I think the other thing for communicators, just kind of given the velocity which with things happen in today's world, is agility, right?
Mhm.
Because we've seen how trends can appear and disappear. We've seen that people are expected to make decisions with clarity at lightning speed. And most importantly, issues are escalating faster than ever before. And they're actually having to deal with issues that we never thought we would have to actually deal with. Cue the astronomer extravaganza.
Yeah.
So, if anything, it's knowing that you, even though you have a plan, just know that like the wind is always going to be in the pivot because things are going to change. So, I keep telling people it's like we have to channel our inner shapeshifter. And the thing
Mm,
that allows us to do that is, as communicators, we're so great at connecting dots, like we can recognize patterns. So
yeah.
being able to like really truly lean into that superpower and deploy it wherever we can, I think is going to be key.
Love that.
Awesome. Hey, I would, Melissa, I'd like to, we've got a question out in the chat. So I'd
Oh,
like to bring somebody in if you don't mind.
yeah.
Meredith Emshoff, would you like to come off of mute and ask your question? Are we able to do that? We're still
Yeah,
able to do that. Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
off mute. I think you guys can probably hear me. Sorry, I'm not on camera because I have
No
this
worries.
lines now. Someone mentioned earlier just the importance of doing deep social listening to just hear what people are saying, which we do a lot of at KO. And we're always looking at different tools and what's the best to use. And we really use multiple tools, but it's something that's always changing. What's the best tool? What are people using? And I think it depends on the platforms, you're trying to check on as well. But I'd love to hear from others, whether it's on here in the chat of what people are using for social listening, as it's just becoming more and more important for understanding where our audience is at.
Cue the unmute Whitney. I feel like you would.
I never want to come onto a webinar like this and tout a product, but we do have we do have a product that we use for this. I truly thank you for queuing this up, but
This was not planned.
yeah, yeah. I did drop a link in the chat earlier to one of the studies that I referenced, which is related to our product, which we have, which is called Allison Advanced Issues Monitor. So this is a tool which is real-time scrapes, fringe networks, conspiracy communities on mainstream networks, other types of social media, to really understand, what are these kernels of conversations that start to bubble up and maybe are fueled by bots and trolls or inauthentic accounts to push a conversation into mainstream media. And that I think is, whatever tool you're using, I do think it's really important for brands to be monitoring those conversations and have like that trigger bell for like, oh, this is really gaining in scale and velocity. And like, we need to pay attention to this because if we don't, we're going to end up getting questions on like mainstream news networks about this thing, and we want to be prepared. So again, we use our own proprietary tool, which is Allison Advanced Issues Monitor, but I know that there's a lot of other tools out there that people can take advantage of. That
How long
do
does it
deep social
take your
listening.
process going through your proprietary process?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a bit to set up the tool. So it's not necessarily something you want to do when the crisis has already struck. Like you want to have it set up and you want to have it working, but then it's real time. Like you've got your dashboards, you can analyze things, you can get, email reports sent through at like certain critical threshold moments. But again, like, I talk about this when we talk about issues response. It's similar with, social listening.
Yeah.
You got to do your homework, right? You've got to have your monitoring set up, your preparedness plan set up far in advance of like, oh, this is, we're getting questions to our boardroom now. So yeah, that's just what I would say on that. Abin, I don't know if you have any insight or tools that you would suggest.
So the one that I know most folks I work with use is Meltwater, which I saw Jenny disrupt in the chat, and I know others use Sprout Social. But I couldn't agree with you more in terms of like not being like prepared. It's like
Yeah.
if you, what is that, like being forewarned is forearmed. Like you have to be so prepared in advance and then know that we need to tweak, switch of all this stuff happens. But I mean, these tools I think are super, super important, particularly the fringe networks, because I think a lot of people don't pay attention to those, and those could be the signals and flares for the things that are going to come your way.
Yeah. The report I share in the chat has a case study on Scholastic, but to your exact point, Abhinav, we looked at Scholastic and the controversy around the banned book Flip Flop, and it was really interesting. I mean, there was definitely an audience that was basically being fueled by fringe network conversations saying that yes, Scholastic should remove these particular books from their school book sales, and that conversation kind of started. But once Scholastic changed their decision and removed them, that's when the social media onslaught really came on the other side, which I don't think they were necessarily anticipating. So again, had they been really looking at the full picture of like, where is this criticism coming from? Is it authentic? Who's driving it? Really clicking down on the profiles of the people that are proliferating these conversations, just getting super familiar with the voices involved, whether they're real or not, may impact, what decision you make in real time on those kind of major cultural moments.
I want to just add something and I would just, continue to ask our audience here. Please feel free to add in any question that you would like. We're going to get to them. But the other thing I would just say on the social listening, we often talk about social listening as a defense, right? Really unpack, hey, what do we have to address? What might not we, what can we avoid? Also, I think 2026, crisis preparedness, I might also shift for people to look at, do you have a proactive approach to taking on cultural moments to your brand's benefit? And I'm not sure we prep enough on the front end for this type of thing, but I would even argue that the conditions are right for a brand really to take off. And we saw some of that during the SNAP, and the government shutdown and around SNAP being, not happening and brands stepping up. And a lot of them were small mom and pop brands that stepped up and really took on a moment and were overwhelmed. But I think their brand got a real big lift.
Yeah, no, and I think Bobby's actually a really good example of that as well, because they had a whole drive to make sure that people got access to formula when the shutdown was still in progress, and the fact that people didn't have what they need for their children. That was, yeah, I think that's a great example of that.
There's a question from Jenny. Jenny, why don't you just take yourself off mute, introduce yourself. Hi, good to see you in the chat, and you can ask your question.
Hi. Oh, my throat just went a bit sore there. Sorry. I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm going to stay off camera. I work for Be the Change Group. We're a social good focused marketing and communications agency and also a research firm. Yeah, I think we've been hearing increasingly from clients conversations around Blue Sky and seen a few good presentations about it as well. I'm curious how you're thinking about building that into 2026 strategies.
So in my universe, most of my clients actually use LinkedIn as their preferred platform. And some have stayed on X because of the demographics that they serve. So they haven't necessarily looked to Blue Sky, but I just knowing that they were set up as a challenger social platform and are meant to be a more, what's the word I want to use, kind of inclusive space with more productive dialogues. I think there's still merit looking at it. But I think it's wholly dependent on who you're looking to reach, and then what the content actually is. That's how I would answer the Blue Sky question. But Whitney, I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, Evan, I echo everything that you're saying. I think for brands, they're still in the early phases of adoption on Blue Sky, but certainly, it is gaining in popularity. And I think even among kind of influencers and news influencers in particular, we're seeing that. I think it's it just shows kind of this growing channel, like that we're seeing in terms of Substack and Blue Sky and reporting taking on different formats. So I would say there's definitely merit in engaging there. What I would caution, as I would caution with adopting any new social media channel, is only do it if you can do it right, right? Like if you can invest the time in it, if you can engage properly, if you can have the community management. If you're not ready to take that step, then it might require more considerations, whether it's the time to take it on. But certainly, if you think you can make the investment, it does allow you to reach a different subset of potential stakeholders, which could be beneficial.
Okay, I'm going to ask one final question before I do some closing remarks. Sorry, but did you have a question, Brad?
Go for it.
Okay. I just want some quick fire responses to this, and this can go to anybody. But given shifting public expectations, what is one practice that comms teams should stop and one that they should start in 2026?
So I would say from a start perspective, because Whitney nicely served this up at the top, when it comes to AI, you should actually move away from using it as your co-pilot and really focus on it being your strategic enabler. Because if it is that you're using it to really truly kind of free up time, and time is like one of the most precious resources we have, I'd say reinvest that time in strategy, because I think that's going to be extremely important in 2026.
I love that. I echo that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll go back to, I think, one of the first points I made on the call, which was around, silence and brands staying quiet. There's more data for you, but I was kind of researching this topic, and there's research that says 92% of brand communicators feel confident in their voice, but nearly 30% hold back for fear of reputational damage. And there's this term which is coming out. I don't know if anybody has heard this, but brand blanding, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, so don't be brand bland. Would be my stop start. Have a little gumption, perhaps, in who you are as an organization and what your purpose is, and stand by it. You don't have to be like, creating the next big marketing campaign around it, but certainly standing by your values, I think, is important, and don't be brand bland.
I love that.
Awesome.
I have just dropped a bunch of links into the chat because there's too much to cover before we wrap things up. Brad, I just want to let you kind of close because I keep on talking right when you're about to talk.
Oh, it's great. Listen, I just wanted to thank our panelists. Oh my gosh, Abena and Whitney. I mean, I don't think we could ask for two better experts to kind of lead this discussion. And we heard some things, and this isn't going to be inclusive, but I took 5 big things away for everyone. 1, listen to your stakeholders and where they're pointing you and your brand. It's in there. 2, if we're engaged in DE&I activities, if you want to thread that needle, critical to show how critical DE&I is to the business strategy and the business profit-making machine, and how it's integrated into the organization strategy. With AI, do not forget humanity is critical to the work that we do in the purpose space and in the social impact space. That is important. Have a framework if you're looking at taking on big issues, so that you're not leading with emotion, but you're leading with data and insight and alignment with all stakeholders. And we predict that 2026 agility will be critical.
Well said. Thank you all for joining us for our final Impact Council of 2025. It did end up feeling quite warm and fuzzy, I would say. Lots of love, lots of good thoughts too, but also so many good lessons. Thanks again, everyone. And please stay in touch in the new year. Have a great holiday break, and we will look forward to connecting again in the new year.
Thank you, everyone.
Adios.
Thank you.